Hello, everybody. Welcome to Boswell's virtual event series bonus hour, or even if though it might not be an hour. And today, I'm Daniel Goldin, the proprietor of Boswell. And today I'm talking to Christine Kendall, the author of two wonderful books for children, The True Definition of Neva Bean, which is just out this fall and is great for kids 8 and up, and Writing Chance, which was nominated for an NAACP Image Award and is for slightly older kids.
Right.
So, but as I always say, there's no older limit because I'm reading them and loving them. So welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So we are big fans of your new book, True Definition of Neva Bean. And I would love to introduce your book to as many people as possible. So I was wondering if you could just say a few words to kind of set up the story.
Yes, thank you. So The True Definition of Neva Bean is the story of a 12-year-old girl who lives in West Philadelphia, as I do. And it's really a story about her political awakening as she struggles to come to terms with the changes in her pre-adolescent body and the fact that her parents, who are musicians, are away for the summer, and she's left with her very traditional grandparents and her older brother, Clay, who, unbeknownst to the parents or the grandparents, is politically active. And he gets himself involved in some activities without the parents' permission. And Neva finds herself in the middle of all these intergenerational conflicts in her home. And really the one comfort object that she has is her dictionary. She loves words, and she very often retires to her room to look things up in her dictionary, which is her way of just figuring things out.
Oh, well, I have 700 questions for you.
Okay.
I'll get to them all. But let's talk about her relationship with Clay. Part of Clay is her older brother. I think he's 16.
He's 16, right.
And she's 12. And they seem to have a good relationship, but they have a little stress point when Clay sort of bumps into her when she's not expecting it. Would you talk a little about that?
Yes, that was well said. This is what I call the mirror scene in the book. And it happens pretty early on in the story. Neva knows that she's beautiful. She knows that she's smart. She's just started wearing a bra, and she's very proud of that. So she's in her grandparents' bedroom, admiring herself in front of the biggest mirror in the house. But Clay sees her, and when he sees her, he just falls out laughing. Not because he's a bad person, but because it's funny, and he wasn't expecting to see somebody, prancing around like that. And so Neva, unfortunately, is humiliated and doesn't want to see Clay. And she sort of spends the good part of that day trying to avoid him. But happily, they do reconcile and move forward. But there is that little bump in the road between Clay and Neva.
Well, her sort of relationship with Clay, and her kind of, I don't know, it's not, the little bump in the road, as we say, sort of develops the plot because she winds up trying to find Clay at the swim club that they go to, and he's not there.
Right. And that's when Neva discovers that Clay has been doing things that no one else in the household, specifically the grandparents, knows about. And that is that he cares deeply about people, and he's been involved in a youth political organization, but he didn't get his grandparents' permission for that. And so Neva discovers that. And she doesn't run out and tell the grandparents, but that does develop the plot. And that's how she sort of gets involved in political activities herself.
I'd love for you to talk a little about the issue that Clay is dealing with the books in prison. Was that something based on a real issue in Pennsylvania?
Yes, it was an issue here in Philadelphia. And actually, I have not kept up with it. It might still be an issue in Philadelphia. There was a law at some point passed that said individuals could not send books to family members who were incarcerated. And that's a serious issue that people here in the community were very concerned about. And in the book, Clay has a friend, Anton, who has a brother who is incarcerated, and Anton is very upset because he can't get books to his brother. And Neva sees that this is happening, and she thinks, wow, this doesn't really sound right to me. So I don't want to give everything away, but there's a little bit of going on between Anton and Neva and what's happening with the books and so on. And oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's interesting to us because in Wisconsin, you have to send books through a bookstore. And there's lots of rules, and the books get rejected. You have to have a receipt, and you can't have staples, and you can't have and the rules are so sort of arbitrary and different for each place that we don't, we get very concerned. We can't, people asked us to send books out of state to other, and we're like, it's going to get rejected. There is a lot of problems with this. I know in other states, you don't, not even all bookstores, you have to be like licensed, especially licensed.
Oh my goodness, right.
Yeah, so it's even worse.
I don't know.
It's obviously a cause that's very important to book lovers everywhere. So
exactly, yes.
Really wonderful.
Neva loves books, and everyone in her family basically loves books. Her grandmother, Nana, reads a lot and so on.
One of the things I love about your book, I love dictionaries, and I know we all use online dictionaries, and I was gonna say, before I start my event, I'm gonna run and get my dictionary, but it's in another room. But I'd love to talk about that, because so Neva's got, you can see from the cover of the book, she's got words braided into her hair. She's always coming up with new words. Every chapter begins with words.
Right.
Was this like, how did you come up with that idea?
Well, I've always liked words, and I've always realized from a really young age that words have power. Words are very, very important. Words can be used to elevate, and sadly, words can be used to wound. And so Neva is very, very thoughtful, and when people throw words out there, she always stops and says to herself, what does that really mean? Like there's this opening scene in the book where she talks about how her Nana was very upset. They were in a department store and someone said something to her, where they're trying to sell perfume, and they say something like, a woman without a fragrance is a woman without a future. And Nana gets very upset and snatches her away. And Neva says, yeah, they both understood that was a crazy way to tell women that they should be wearing perfume or something like that. But not only does she challenge and analyze other people's words, but she thinks about the words that she's using herself. And that's one of the things that I wanted to think about with young readers is, think about the words that you yourself are using and the impact that they have on others.
I love the idea of how powerful that is. I also sort of felt it was, like I said, we all use online dictionaries for various things, but you don't really get the nuance. And just like with bookstores, it's a very different experience buying online and going in a store and browsing.
Right.
Physical reference books are so cool because you really interact with whatever it is, the word or the map, if it's an atlas, or the facts, if it's an almanac, or I have this weird old habit of, I love music, and I don't listen to much music now, but in my teens and 20s and 30s, I love music, and I love Billboard charts. And so I have these, and I would memorize them. When I was in high school, one of my camp instructors would walk me around. He's like, ask him a song, ask him a song, and I tell the person how it moved on Billboard.
Oh, you were really into it.
Very. But I still love, I can find all the stuff on Wikipedia, but I'll just take out my little book with where everything peaked and and it's so much fun because it's discovery.
Right.
Neva's gonna find words that she just didn't find anywhere else if she's playing with the dictionary.
Exactly, and that's what can happen. I will have to admit that I've never been a reader of the dictionary, but I do go to a hard copy dictionary and to find things, and then you look at the other words around it, and you discover more than you had originally gone there seeking, and that's exciting.
Okay, so that's everybody should have a dictionary. Admittedly, I understand the downside of it. Some dictionaries are prescriptive, some are descriptive.
Right.
They go out of date. Sometimes the definitions aren't so good anymore.
Right.
I'm not saying you should only have a book. You should definitely look other places for words. I love to talk about the friendship with Jamila. Jamila is her best friend. She's they have a lot in common, but they're different too. Talk a
Right.
little about that.
Yes, Jamila is, as you said, Neva's best friend. She's more confident of where she is in terms of her developing body, and sort of doesn't quite understand Neva's fascination with the new girl on the block, Michelle, who's a few years older than them and is more sophisticated and is more physically developed than they are. But more importantly, Jamila's parents are there. Her father, who is from Ghana, which is a country on the west coast of Africa, is there, as well as her mother. And Neva sort of is very, very much missing her own parents who are in Europe. So she's a little envious that Jamila has her parents there right beside her all day, every day, and Neva doesn't. And then Jamila's father decides to take the family on a trip to his home country, which is Ghana. And then Neva really gets upset and nervous and jealous because, again, her parents are in Europe, and now Jamila's going to be in West Africa, and where is she? Just home.
You know, I love that the parents being gone is sort of does double duty, because you know, I had mentioned it to our kids buyer, like, and then the parents are not there. They're on concert tour in Europe. She said, well, that's a good way to get at the parents.
Right.
Because it's so traditional, especially in middle grade books, for the kids to be orphans or to be set with a relative. You know, like, you got to get the parents out of the picture. And in fact, there is a bit of that, because the parents, if Clay had said, well, you know, I'm going on this protest march, I had a feeling the parents would have said, yeah, we're coming.
Right, yeah.
So they needed the kind of more conservative grandparents to send them back. But also there's the counterpoint with Neva and Jamila, where Jamila's parents go away and they're like, we're taking you. So, so I think kids will really kind of catch that and find that really interesting. I also love that there's little pieces of Ghanaian culture, you know, in the family. I really enjoyed that. Did you do research? Did you have friends? Like, how did you?
Yeah, I did do research, and actually I have a very good friend who is from Ghana. And when I thought about including that in the book, because in my West Philadelphia neighborhood, which is where the book is set, there is a large African community here. There are lots of people from Ethiopia and Nigeria and Ghana and so on. And there's lots of African shops and so on. So I thought, oh, why not include that in the book? And then, of course, I was very concerned about writing about a culture that isn't my own. So I did reading, and I had numerous conversations with my friend, and my friend actually read the manuscript for me. So it was fun to learn all of that.
Yeah, I love that. We actually once did an event at, there's actually a Nigerian cultural center on the northwest side of Milwaukee. And I had befriended an author, Chikasi Obiama, who we had already done an event with him in the store, and there was some opportunity to do another. I'm like, let's try it over there and see what it's like. And it was, they fed us afterwards. So it was,
oh, great. Yeah, nice.
So cultural references of Africa, but also cultural references of Philadelphia. So I love the little details. Do people really say newsy instead of nosy?
Yes, they do say newsy instead of nosy.
You don't do the cliched cheesesteak, but you do water ice. And I'd love for you to explain, because really, we don't have it. I know when people read the book, they're thinking snow cone, but it's not a snow cone. So talk a little about water ice.
Yeah, I lived in Philadelphia between the time that I was 5 and 11, and we always had water ice in the summer. It's a summer treat. It's basically flavored ice. I mean, that's really what it is. But it's just delicious. It's sweet and it's delicious. It's something you have in the summertime. And then I left Philadelphia and lived in the New Jersey suburbs for years, and we didn't have water ice over there. But then when I moved back to Philly, it's water ice again. So that had to be in the book.
Yeah, it's really distinctive. And people call it Italian ices in some parts of the country too, but I think there's more fruit in water ice. Like,
there can be fruit. There's different flavors of
right. Whereas you wouldn't put that in a snow cone. And I think I read a little about this because I grew up in New York, where it was called Italian ices, but so it wasn't like water ice, but we had one place called the Lemon Ice King of Corona, which had like 50 flavors, and it was homemade and family owned, and people would wait in a really long line. And I think that was probably the closest thing. They're both derived, I think, from Granita.
I think so, yes. Yeah.
So you could also go to Italy. But it did make me, we have custard, which is fine. And it's not, and then we did the same thing you do with water ice. We're like, somebody from another country is like, well, we have custard. I'm like, do you scoop it? Because if you don't scoop it, it isn't really custard.
Oh, you're very specific. Okay.
Yeah, it's egg content, a certain amount of egg content, and there's a whole bunch of and very snobby. Like you're like, this is the best one, that one's not as good. A lot of that. I wanted to talk a little about, and also one of the other things was the swim club, because we have country clubs for the wealthy people, and then we have public pools. They're all closed right now for everybody else. Mm-hmm. But this is sort of a hybrid, isn't it?
It's sort of a hybrid. Yeah, it's a pool in the local community, but it is not open to the public. It is a membership sort of organization. And people here in the neighborhood pay X amount of dollars and you're in basically for life. And it's a very nice thing. And sadly this summer, I couldn't watch the kids going back and forth and tripping down the street in their flip-flops and towels and all that stuff. But lots of people go to the swim club.
And it's affordable.
And it's affordable, yes. And I'm not a member of the swim club because we live in a condominium building and we have an indoor pool here in our condo. So we're not members of the swim club. But I watch people all the time in the summer going up and down the street on their way to and from the swim club. And it's very much a part of the community.
I love that it brings you joy just watching people go.
It does, yeah, it does. You see these kids coming down the street, they got their things all around their waist, and they have the towels and the flip-flops, and the mom's got the umbrella.
I love that. We actually had, once again, didn't belong either, but we had something like that about 5 miles north of us. It was a place called Deepdale, and it was just a pool. It was like a pool surrounded by a fence. Mm-hmm. And every so often my mother would get invited as a guest. But I could visualize it because it's not a country club.
It's definitely not a country club.
Yeah, no, it's just like
there's a place for barbecuing around the pool. I think there's even a basketball court over at some portion of the facility there. I have friends who belong, so I've been over there a couple of times, but it's very nice.
One of the things I wanted to mention about your first book, Writing Chance, is we had a school event, and we discussed the inspiration for the book, and it's about a young Black boy who becomes a polo player, and that's inspired. I'd love for you to talk just a little bit, like we're definitely talking about Neva today, but I just wanted you to mention a little, because I just love the story and it made me think of so many things.
Oh yeah, this is a great story. I was listening to NPR, National Public Radio, one morning, and this was a few years ago, and I heard this incredible story about kids in Philadelphia who were in a mentoring program called the Work to Ride program. You learn how to care for horses, and if you're interested, you can learn how to ride horses, but they also have a polo team. And so what was discussed on NPR was the fact that this polo team had won the 2011 national championships. I forget actually what title they won, but the fact that these kids who had no exposure to horses or the game of polo got involved in the sport and won a national championship, I thought was phenomenal. So I went online, I did some research, and I started learning about polo, and the more I learned, the more intrigued I became. And then I found a photo of one of the kids in the program that I just thought was beautiful. And so a few weeks later, I happened to be going to a writing workshop, and the instructor asked everyone to bring a copy of a photo that really touched their heart. So no question for me, I took that photo of this kid on his polo pony, and that ended up being the inspiration for my first novel, Writing Chance.
Yeah. I love how you use photos to kind of inspire people. One of the things I did, well, first of all, we had a comment like, oh, that's what a polo shirt is.
Right.
And I also went, there is a polo club in Heartland, which is actually pretty far, probably 30 miles west of here. And I was like, I wonder if they have a mentor program, but it's not like yours, which is right in Philadelphia.
Right.
I did, however, find some interesting things, because I'm always interested, as is the country, in sports and sort of what sports are become accessible to poorer kids and kids of color. And and what don't. And one of the things that I found is there are some interesting opportunities here for some of our quirky sports. So one thing is that we do a lot of sailing. And there's, because we're on Lake Michigan, and there's something called, there's a nonprofit called the Milwaukee Community Sailing Club, which has a program like that. So kids from the city can sail. And then another one I found is actually another thing. This is you would think of this as very New England, but there's actually a lot of interest in crew here. And it's a big, we have rivers and stuff, but it's just a big crew town. So we call it rowing, except when we go to a championship, and then we call it crew. And, but the Milwaukee Rowing Club also has a program which is called it's called Stem to Stern.
Oh, that's fantastic. Philadelphia is a big crewing or rowing town also, because we have a lot of universities here, and there's actually Boathouse Row along the Schuylkill River, and there's crewing regattas a couple times a year. It's exciting.
Yeah, we have a big thing. Well, we would have in the fall, where like the whole city is taken up by all the rivers get taken up by competition. I tried to find. Aside from polo, the other sport that I had mentioned, that you can see people playing cricket and you can see people playing rugby, but I don't think they're huge markets. I know the cricket is, I see it at the engineering school and then there is some rugby, but I don't see it all the place. The thing that there's a lot of curling. You know what curling is?
Curling, wait a minute. Tell me.
So what I call it, it's shuffleboard on ice.
Yes, exactly.
Right. With a little housework, because you have to
do a little housework.
It is huge in Canada. Wisconsin was actually the capital of curling, but we have been recently overtaken by
I didn't know that.
Minnesota. Minnesota's the big curling town. So interesting, the Milwaukee Curling Club is actually 25 miles north of Milwaukee, but the Wauwatosa Club, which is the next town west of us, actually is pretty accessible. And so I look to see if there is a nonprofit that does, because I feel like every kid from black and brown kid should be doing curling just because they would think it was hilarious. So that's my goal, is to learn how to play it.
What's a full body workout too, because are you skating, right? And you're also doing all this, right?
Now what's cool is there's accessible, like there's a wheelchair team, like so you could do it accessibly and stuff like that. So it's a really interesting Wisconsin thing. So with the cheese curds and the custard.
Exactly.
Let's get back to Neva. One thing is I really love Nana and Granddad. And, at first we come, this book is so much about not making assumptions about people.
Right.
So we have Michelle, who Nana says is a little, judges her by her clothing. And she's got a lot more things to say. This becomes a bit of a triangle with her friend. She comes a little between Jamila and Neva, but that doesn't detract from, like, she's a much more three-dimensional person than Nana's assumptions, which get passed on to Neva. And certainly Neva's assumptions about her grandparents are a little off as well. And we had said, we don't want to give anything away, and we didn't talk about it. I'm like, I just have to talk about the Granddad and the baby holding. Could you talk a little about that?
Yes. Granddad, it has this very gruff exterior. And so Neva is having a very hard time with him during the summer because he's very, very strict with her. And so at some point, though, she learns that Granddad, even though he doesn't necessarily want she and Clay to be involved politically in their neighborhood, Granddad is very much involved in the community and making a positive contribution to the community. Specifically, he volunteers at the local hospital and he holds babies whose parents are not available to take care of them. And so Neva knows that he volunteers at the hospital, but she has no notion of what it is he actually does. And so I think it's a very tender moment in the book where he actually takes her to the hospital and they have a conversation there, and she gets to see what it is he's actually doing. And she sees this other side of him.
Yeah, so is this how common is this? Do most hospitals have this sort of program? Do some hospitals?
Some hospitals do. I actually knew about this years ago. A woman that I had worked with had a husband who was retired, and her husband was doing this in his retirement. He was going, this was in New York City, he was going to the local hospital holding babies. So that's when I first heard about it. And I always thought it was such a nice thing, and I just sort of held it in my head. And then when I decided that I was going to have Granddad do that in the book, I actually talked to a friend who did that. This is a younger guy who I think did it when he was a college student. And he, I think, was maybe when he was in grad school at Columbia, and he did it in his spare time at Columbia University.
Oh, yeah,
He actually went to a hospital and held babies. So I interviewed him as part of the book. Again, you have to do research so that you want to get these things right. I had a long conversation with him about this holding of the babies.
Do you have, are you able to talk about what you're working on next?
I'm happy to talk about it, except I don't really know where it's going.
This is good for the creative process, so people know that things don't come together immediately.
Right.
Like you have an idea, and it leads to something else, and it leads to something else.
Yes. A few years ago, I wrote a short story about two 8-year-old twin brothers. And I actually got the story published, which was wonderful. But it feels like the story isn't finished. You know how sometimes these characters linger with you, and it feels like there's more to this story than I laid out in the short story. So I'm trying to expand that into a novel now. And I'm not quite sure where I'm going to go with that. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to have the protagonist be 8 years old, or if I'm going to have the protagonist be 18 and looking back on what happened when he was 8.
Oh, so interesting. What people don't realize about novels is that is so important, because like an 18-year-old looking back at being 8, that might not be a kid's book, that might be an adult book.
Right.
But 8 is a little, people, one of the things, there's all sorts of weird rules. And so one of the rules about middle grade and he's in teen is the kids need to be a little older than the reader.
Right.
And so if you make an 8-year-old, well, is that a chapter book?
Exactly. And the thing is, in the short story, I really got this 8-year-old's voice.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a 10-year-old's voice or a 12-year-old's voice. I think it's an 8-year-old's voice. So I'm trying to figure out how, this is what I'm trying to work out.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Thank you for that insight. I love it. Did I forget to ask you a question that I should have, that you would like to answer?
No, this has been fun. This has been a lot of fun.
I love it. And I'm so grateful that you talked to us. True Definition of Neva Bean is available at Boswell, but it's also available at whatever independent bookstore that you happen to love to go to. Or maybe you should try a new one. I don't know. Wishing you continued success and hope to see you again.
Thank you so much. This has been so much fun. And I hope to make it to Milwaukee at some point.
Someday you can come with Lori Tharps.
Right. Oh, yes. All righty. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.